Part 1. The foundation of sand and the moment of collapse. The intensive care unit. It's not a room. It's a suspended state of being. Every sensory detail is etched into my memory with a horrifying clarity. The sterile, metallic scent of the cleaning solutions. The constant, low hum of machinery, a symphony of dread, and the rhythmic, unforgiving sound that measured my life. The hiss-click of the ventilator. That was Arthur's breath, not his own, but the mechanical truth of his survival. For 7 days I, Sarah, was tethered to that sound, watching the man I loved, my husband, Arthur, fight for a life that was about to be proven a colossal, meticulously constructed lie. I was 28. He was 32. We had built a life on 7 years of shared history, quiet comfort, and what I believed was unshakable trust. He was everything I valued. Kind, considerate, the man who would always spoil me with spontaneous gestures and remembered details. Our home was full of comfort, planned trips, and the promise of a future that felt as solid as the oak floorboards beneath our feet. But the foundation was sand. I just hadn't dug deep enough to see it. The crack, the sole, persistent anomaly, was his phone. Arthur was private with his phone. Profoundly, intensely so. If he moved from the couch, the phone went into his pocket. If I walked into the room, he'd flip the screen over. I had spent years meticulously justifying this behavior. He must be looking at porn, or having private conversations with buddies and family. I'd tell myself, dismissing the gnawing instinct that whispered, he's hiding something vital. I let it slide, because there were never any loud signs of infidelity. No lipstick on his collar, no perfume in the laundry, no mysterious absences. The absence of noise, I now know, was not peace. It was the perfect disguise. Flashback. 5 years ago, the promotion dinner. We were celebrating his promotion. We were dressed up, sitting at a quiet table in the Italian restaurant he loved. He was animated, talking about his new responsibilities, his eyes sparkling with ambition. I felt a surge of pride. This was my man, my partner. He paused to take a sip of wine, then his hand automatically reached for his phone on the table. He quickly checked the screen, his face flickering with an expression I couldn't quite read. A quick, almost anxious look of relief. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked, smiling. "Yeah, fine. Just a quick text from the boss. Just confirming details for Monday." He placed the phone down, face up this time, but instantly covered the screen with his napkin. A small, nervous gesture I filed away as habitual professionalism. I didn't press. I accepted the narrative. The truth, I now realize, was that he was confirming something with her. He was ensuring the continuity of the other life he was celebrating, the life that ran parallel to mine. The celebratory wine tasted like success to me, but to him, it was merely the lubrication for his grand deception. The sudden, brutal severe illness had shattered our routine, forcing him into the ICU, kept alive by ventilation and countless procedures. The terror of his potential death was so complete, so consuming, that it acted as a perfect emotional buffer. All other concerns, all those small nagging doubts, were silenced by the overwhelming fear of loss. I had to be strong. I had to be supportive. The glimpse into the vault. Then came the day of grotesque, shattering irony, Valentine's Day. A day of performative love. I was holding his inert hand, watching the numbers flash. His phone, the one he'd finally given to me just before they wheeled him away, vibrated. It was a call from an unfamiliar number. I answered, my voice tired from lack of sleep. "Hello, this is his wife, Sarah. I'm handling his calls." This is a confirmation call regarding a missed delivery from Home Essentials, the agent stated, his tone flat and professional. My heart actually gave a little, pathetic flutter of hope. A last-minute, romantic delivery? A desperate gesture before the illness truly consumed him? Oh, thank you. Yes, it must be for me. Please confirm the address is our home address, I said, reciting our address, his name, my name. The agent's reply was the sound of a judge handing down a sentence. Cold. Final. I just need to confirm the name and address for redelivery. Ma'am, I apologize, but you are the wrong person. The intended recipient is L. Thompson, at an address on Maple Street. The air in the room suddenly felt thick and toxic. L. Thompson. Maple Street. The words were simple, yet they contained the detonation codes for my entire life. I mumbled a thank you and disconnected the call, my mind spinning violently. L. Thompson. L. Thompson. Who is she? Why a delivery? Why on Maple Street, blocks away from us? I tried, desperately, to concoct an innocent scenario, a coworker he was helping, a family emergency, but the cold dread was absolute. The primal instinct I had ignored for years surged forward, demanding the truth. My hand shook, but I forced my finger to open the delivery app. I went straight to the order history. The screen illuminated my nightmare. It wasn't one missed delivery. It was a terrifying, 5-year timeline of meticulous devotion. The list scrolled down and down. December 12, 2023. Gourmet holiday hamper. October 31st, 2022. Children's fall decorations and costumes. April 15th, 2021. Flower arrangement. Pink lilies. September 5th, 2020. Toddler scooter and helmet. February 14th, 2019. Valentine's Day balloon bouquet. 5 years worth. The realization was a silent, catastrophic collapse. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a physical fling. This was a calculated, sustained, parallel life. He was providing for another woman and her children, using our money, our time, our trust. He was her provider, her confidant, her emotional safety net. He was her true love, while I was simply the woman who kept the other half of the house clean. The scale of betrayal was overwhelming. The life I mourned, the life I was terrified of losing to his illness, had died years ago, killed by his own meticulous deceit. The confrontation with complicity. The shock was a physical force. My body seized up. I looked at Arthur's still, beautiful face, and the rage and the sorrow became a single, monstrous emotion. I couldn't hold it. The air was violently expelled from my lungs in a raw, ragged gasp. My knees buckled. I fell to the linoleum floor, the phone skittering away, the damning light of the screen reflecting off the polished white tiles. Brenda, Arthur's mother, was sitting across the room, reading a novel. My sudden, raw collapse brought her running. She rushed to me, shouting, her face contorted in panic. Her concern was singular. What is it? What happened? Is he gone? Tears streamed down my face, but I fought through the suffocating fear. No. He's okay, Brenda. He's okay, I whispered, forcing the words out. I snatched the phone and thrust the illuminated screen into her face. But look at this. 5 years. All deliveries to L. Thompson. She took the phone. Her eyes quickly scanned the display. The initial panic, the terror for her son, vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, hard, calculating stillness. She didn't even blink. She didn't gasp. There was no shock. Only immediate, furious defense. She tossed the phone back toward the bed like it was trash. Her voice was low, cutting, and entirely venomous. "This isn't important, Sarah. Look where you are. You made me think my son had died." In that single, agonizing moment, the realization solidified. She was in on it, too. Her rage wasn't genuine distress over her son. It was an attempt to silence me, to minimize, to protect his lie. She didn't want the perfect image of her beloved son tainted by my painful, inconvenient truth. I was convinced that she would have minimized what had happened regardless of the circumstances. The family reputation, the myth of the perfect husband and son, was worth more than my shattered heart. I was utterly alone, kneeling on the floor of the ICU, my marriage murdered, my husband dying, and his own mother attacking me. I pulled myself up, refusing to let her see any more weakness. I wiped the tears away and silently returned to the chair. I had to swallow how I felt. The war was on, but the battlefield was wrong. I was trapped between my grief for the man who was dying and my fury at the liar he was. I had to try to honor his passing and be a good widow for now. But the detective work had already begun in my heart. The truth would not stay buried. Part 2. The digital archaeology and the poisoned grief. The moment Arthur's machines fell silent, the war inside me intensified. The man who had been the love of my life was gone, but the man who was the masterful liar remained, haunting every corner of my mind. My emotions were a toxic alloy, a deep, shattering grief for the person I had loved, contaminated by a volcanic, sickened rage for the deceitful stranger I had buried. I had such a strange mixture of grief and betrayal. The subsequent days were a nightmare of performance. Everyone's focus was of course on his passing. The community narrative, the tragic loss of the young, devoted husband, was aggressively enforced by his family. My own trauma, my discovery, was instantly pushed to the very back. I had to swallow how I felt and tried to honor his passing and be a good widow. I stood at the funeral, listening to the eulogies. Each glowing adjective for his character felt like a physical assault. His sister spoke of his unshakable loyalty. His best friend praised his constant presence. Brenda, his mother, clutched my hand with a crushing grip, her eyes daring me to speak the truth. I played the role perfectly, the beautiful, heartbroken survivor. But the silence I maintained was not respect. It was the gathering of force. The archaeology of deceit. Once the funeral was done and the house fell into a cold, echoing silence, the mask came off. The good widow went into detective mode. This was no longer about closure. It was about the excavation of my sanity. I couldn't rebuild my life on the shifting sands of a 5-year lie. I needed every ugly, precise detail. I became an archaeologist of deceit, meticulously sifting through his phone, bank accounts, emails, etc. I realized that the man I married was a ghost, and the evidence of his real life was contained entirely within his digital footprint. The financial roadmap. The bank statements were a cold, hard roadmap of his true priorities. The recurring transfers, coded vaguely as monthly contribution or miscellaneous expense, were not sporadic acts of generosity. They were a budget line item. This was a consistent, significant financial commitment, used to support Elle Thompson and her few kids. I found one specific record that froze my blood. A substantial transfer marked Education Fund. On the same day, we had a major argument about whether we could afford to hire a financial planner for our future. He had argued that we needed to be prudent and wait. He wasn't waiting. He was investing in her family's stability. Our shared future was a resource pool for his parallel life. The communication logs, time stolen. The communication records were the worst. The sheer volume was staggering. He'd been in close contact with this woman for 5 years, messaging and calling her multiple times a week. I began cross-referencing the timestamps with my memories, transforming simple data into visceral pain. Flashback, the movie night. I remember a quiet Tuesday night, 6 months ago. We were watching an old classic. I was dozing, feeling safe and content. Arthur had gone to the kitchen to get water, and was gone for almost 30 minutes. I remembered feeling a brief, sleepy annoyance. The phone records showed a 27-minute call logged with L. Thompson. He wasn't getting water. He was stepping into his other life, sharing a deep, 27-minute slice of vulnerability with her while I lay on the couch, blindly trusting his physical proximity. The realization that this happened often, probably while we lay on the couch together, was the true poison. He was physically present, but emotionally a continent away, making our moments of intimacy nothing but profound, silent betrayals. The emails and photos. The depth of the lie. I searched his archived emails, hoping for something that would mitigate the severity, a sign of conflict, a desire to end things. Instead, I found a treasury of shared affection and planning. One email from L. Thompson detailed her son's anxiety about starting a new school. Arthur's reply was full of empathy, promising to call them both later to talk it through. He was performing the duties of a supportive father figure, a role he never had to contemplate with me. The photo gallery contained hundreds of pictures of her children, birthday parties, school events, trips to the park. He was actively documenting and participating in their lives. I found a photo of L. Thompson smiling, wearing a necklace I distinctly remembered Arthur buying. I had asked him about it, and he'd told me it was a corporate gift he passed on to his sister. Another deliberate, small lie, building the tower of deceit. The failure of denial. The evidence made my initial attempt at denial, that this friendship wasn't as bad as him sleeping with her, look pathetic. This wasn't a friendship. This was a complete, sustained, emotional partnership. I was the secondary figure, the one who facilitated the stable home environment that allowed him the bandwidth to run his primary, secret emotional life. I was paralyzed by the complexity. How could I grieve a man who did this? How could I hate the man I had just buried? I sought help. I went for therapy about the situation. Dr. Elena, naming the wound. Dr. Elena, my therapist, became the quiet, objective voice in the chaos. She was the first person to use the term emotional cheating without minimizing it. Sarah, she said gently, Arthur was an empty vessel in your marriage. He took all of his emotional intimacy, his vulnerability, his future planning, and his resources, and gave them to L. Thompson. That is not just a breach of fidelity. It is a betrayal of the partnership's foundation. That is why emotional cheating can actually be far worse than physical cheating. The validation hit me like a revelation. My pain was not simply due to jealousy or grief. It was due to the systemic demolition of my reality. I had been living a sham. The rage, the confusion, the isolation, it was all justified. It took time, but I finally confronted my feelings and put aside all that had happened to appreciate and work through my anger, pain, and resentment. The realization that I had a right to be furious at his memory was the first true step toward healing. I stopped defending his ghost and started fighting for my own survival. The truth, ugly as it was the only clean thing I possessed. Part 3. The reckoning of truth and the fight for sanity. The silence in my house, once deafening, was now an arsenal. The manila folder on the kitchen counter held the evidence, but the true weapon was the calm, icy clarity I had forged in therapy. I had achieved the necessary detachment, the knowledge that the man I buried was a ghost, and the man who lied was a stranger. Now, the final battle was against his loyalists. Dr. Elena had framed it perfectly. Your biggest challenge is not Arthur. It is the world's need for the comfortable lie. Your truth is an explosive device under their narrative. They will fight you with gaslighting, shame, and minimization. I decided to stop hiding. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was declaring independence. I called a meeting with the key family members: Brenda, his mother, his brother, Robert, and his sister, Laura, at what had been our home. I needed them to hear the truth in the very space where the lie had thrived. The tension when they arrived was thick enough to cut. They sat in the living room, anticipating a tearful, weary widow seeking reassurance. They saw a woman with steady eyes and a file folder. I began without preamble. I asked you here because I need to stop playing a part. I didn't just lose Arthur to illness. I lost my marriage to a deliberate, sustained deception. A deception, Brenda, that you knew about and helped maintain. Brenda's denial was instantaneous, a master class in deflection. I will not listen to this nonsense, Sarah. You are grieving. You are hysterical. You need to rest, not concoct cruel fantasies. I ignored her, sliding the bank statements and delivery history across the polished wood table. Fantasy? This is 5 years of financial records. Regular transfers, coded vaguely, proving he was providing substantial support for Elle Thompson and her few kids. This is the delivery history. Toys, groceries, flowers. He was playing the role of husband and provider elsewhere. I held up the printout of the education fund transfer. This money, which he argued we couldn't afford for our own future, went to her. This wasn't generosity, Robert. This was stealing from our partnership to fund his primary emotional relationship. Robert tried the compassionate, patriarchal route. Sarah, you have to realize that stress can do things to people. Maybe he was depressed or lonely. Maybe he needed a friend, and that friendship just got a little complicated. He loved you. You know that. We all know that. The gaslighting siege. The moment I finished speaking, the coordinated attack began. It was a vicious, calculated campaign of gaslighting. They did not address the evidence. They attacked my character and my right to mourn honestly. They tried to gaslight me and minimize what had happened and make it seem like I was being a bad widow by tarnishing his good name. Laura, his sister, jumped up, her face tight with anger. You're ruining his memory. He can't defend himself. You're being cruel to the dead, Sarah. You should be ashamed. Brenda stood over me, her voice low and venomous. You should forgive and forget. What is the point of dredging up this pain? Don't you know people will think you're bitter and vengeful? You're being a bad widow. You are destroying the legacy of a man we all loved. The pressure was immense. They were using my role, the widow, as a straitjacket, attempting to force me into silent compliance. They wanted me to be a dutiful, tearful monument to their version of Arthur. They were desperately trying to convince you you're in the wrong, leveraging societal shame to bury my truth. But I was ready. I looked directly at Brenda, remembering the coldness of her eyes in the ICU. No, I said, my voice rising, firm and unshaking. I am not being cruel to the dead. I am being honest with the living. He chose to be a liar for 5 years. I refuse to be a liar for the rest of my life. I slammed the communication logs onto the table. He spent more time talking to Elle Thompson about her children's homework than he spent talking to me about my own life goals. He gave her his time, his money, his emotional vulnerability. That is not a complicated friendship, Robert. That is the wholesale transfer of a husband's loyalty. Emotional cheating is real, and it is the complete and utter betrayal of everything we built. I am grieving the loss of the man I loved, and I am raging at the man who betrayed me. You can grieve and rage at the same time. It isn't an either-or situation. With those words, the final tie to them was severed. They left, one by one, slamming the door on the comfortable myth they were fighting to preserve. I had lost the last remnants of his family, but I had decisively protected my truth. I refused to let them think and feel for me. In that moment of complete isolation, I was finally, truly free. I finally put myself and my feelings first. The hard work of self-rescue. The weeks that followed were dedicated to radical self-care and separation. Dr. Elena helped me channel the rage into constructive action. I changed the locks immediately, symbolically marking the boundary between my space and the ghosts of their family. My most therapeutic act was selling the house. It was financially painful, but psychologically essential. Every room was tainted. Every shadow held the memory of him scrolling on his phone, a moment of silence dedicated to his other life. The sale was my final, monumental act of sovereignty. It was the physical erasure of his pervasive, suffocating lie from my life. I purged everything: photos, gifts, clothes. I didn't want the financial proceeds from a home built on stolen trust, but I needed the separation. The clean, empty apartment I moved into felt like a pristine, untainted canvas, a space built entirely by me for me. The wisdom of scars. 2 years have passed since the funeral and the great reckoning. The distance is vast, almost surreal. It's strange, I almost feel external to our relationship and the incident now. The raw, toxic heat of resentment has entirely cooled. I no longer resent him. I view our marriage not as a defining tragedy, but as an unfortunate thing that happened, a difficult, brutal chapter that taught me the most profound lessons about self-worth and discernment. The anger has been replaced by a quiet, protective wisdom. I have learned to listen to the subtle tremors I missed before. I understand that the absence of loud signs doesn't equate to peace. It often means a highly sophisticated level of deceit. My wisdom is a shield now. I'm moving on. I am with someone new now, and they're great. He is everything Arthur pretended to be: transparent, honest, and truly present. His phone is just a phone, not a fortress. But the wound has left its scar, a constant, quiet teacher. I am of course a lot more cautious now. The caution is not fear. It's a non-negotiable standard of respect. My journey was not about achieving some moral victory over Arthur's ghost. It was about saving myself. It is living proof that therapy does work. I would not have made it through this without a caring and professional person to review the situation with me. My final, firm message to anyone else trapped in this isolating dilemma: don't ignore the signs just because they aren't loud. The intense phone privacy, the vague absences, those are the quiet threads of a deep secret. Emotional cheating is real, and secrecy is often cause for suspicion. Protect your heart, and take control of your life and emotions. You can move on without forgiving or forgetting. You simply put yourself first. I am not the woman he betrayed. I am the woman who saved herself.